Coming up on Mount Hermeneutics, Paul of Tarsus, apostle or false prophet? Brian and I are going to discuss this in this matless episode, so keep it right here. You're listening to Mount Hermeneutics, where three Marines give their perspective on God, faith, and spirituality with a heavy lean on the divine council worldview. This is not your grandma's Sunday school, nor is it always for the Christian faint of heart. Nothing about who we are or what we say make us experts. But you better believe we'll have a take, and perhaps it won't suck.
Yeah, that's getting cut out.
Those are my
Well,
those are my
it's not like we're monetized, so
Well,
adventures in
I
security.
think there's a couple of words that would like prevent future monetization, and that's
It'd be
probably
like
one of them.
shadow banned or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
well,
This is also terrible show content. We should move on.
you
We
brought
should
it
move
up.
Remember that Mount Hermeneutics is free and available on all podcast platforms, including YouTube. So if you're watching the video right now, you'll notice that Matt is not here. It's just Brian and I. And hit the notification bell and subscribe and leave a comment anyway. Mike, I know your boy's not here, but go ahead and leave a comment anyway. I mean, this we're talking about Paul. You know, everyone knows Paul. Everybody knows Paul.
Everybody
So
knows Paul.
yeah, so this is gonna be, interesting. If maybe you'll even learn something. Maybe you'll become a heretic like me. Hopefully not. So, so Brian, in case you're new here, I am Andre. That is Brian. There is no Matt. Hey man, what's up?
Hey, Dre. It's, I'm as you go through it, I'm reminded of I did the opening. Did I do I think I did the
You
opening.
you did.
Yeah. And I didn't do all the things that you do.
Well, I
I
mean,
kind of I felt bad because I forgot how it goes, but I did my best. Quit judging me.
I remember watching Matt's face. He's like, "Yeah, close enough. Let's just get into it." So, like,
It's
we did it.
weird just doing two of us.
It
Like
is weird.
I usually just kind of let you guys banter and then
We're like, "Hey, what'd you do this weekend?" You're like, "I didn't do anything. Can we get on with the show?" Like, I don't know.
um but without you two to banter and I like it's just like it's a total like the whole energy is different for me. Like I don't it's like driving on the left side of the right side of the car or
Yeah,
something.
that is weird.
Yeah.
You ever drive stick like that?
No. I
It's
don't think I
weird.
could I don't think I could do it.
You can. It's weirdly intuitive.
Like you like operating with your using it with your left hand. I would crash and die. I don't think
No,
so.
you really wouldn't because the gas pedal's still on the right side and the clutch is still in the same place.
Yeah.
But first gear's way over there, right? So, like,
Yeah.
but it's easy to do because when you're driving, you're still hugging the line, right? So you're on the right side of the car, but you're on the left side of the road, and where the line is still makes sense while you're driving. It's I did it in Okinawa and in England.
I know that whenever I like I've driven a stick for like my entire adult life. Um so I don't even think about it.
Right.
But I find that when I think about it, like when I'm like when I try like I don't know how to do it now. Like I don't know how
Like if you had
like
to write out instructions, you'd be like,
yeah,
I
like intellectually I don't know how it works. I it's just my body just does it and the car gets where it's supposed to. And but if I have to think about how am I doing this, then it gets all weird and I can't do it.
it's
So
kind of like before we had cell phones, you memorize people's phone numbers. You just
yeah.
knew. Yeah, I don't know. Like you just knew numbers. And now that everything's locked in and who is this? I don't have your contact. I don't know you. Leave a message.
Yeah.
All of a sudden I've started to get into the letters not Paul. And not because of Paul, just because
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, first, second, third John's cool. Like there's there's good stuff. James, of course, Peter. I'm like, oh, okay.
It's very like it's very striking that and like it shouldn't be striking as a believer, but it's striking to me that there are unbelievers, that they exist. Like considering reading these letters, how much like it comes across that these were real people. Like it seems like a dumb thing to say,
Right.
but people think of, they tend to think of them as fictional characters. Like I've met skeptics who like, how do you know Peter even existed? Because we have letters from Peter. He didn't write those. Okay, who wrote them? And let's just say that you're correct that they're forgeries. Why is someone trying to pass himself off as Peter? What would be the
That's
benefit?
right. Right. So if he wasn't a real person, why would he say he is that
Like,
guy?
yeah, why impersonate a fictional
Yeah.
character?
I'm like that's like me impersonating Superman, right? And then 2000 years later, like, are we sure there was a Superman? Well, no, we know there wasn't one because we have so much documentation about how fucking fictional he is. Like, like what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, why would I pretend to be somebody who's fictional?
Well,
It's
there is that there's a skeptics argue the Spider-Man argument. Have you heard this?
mm-mm, mm-mm.
Well, well, it's kind of it's in response to Christians typically, like pointing to the archaeological evidence that confirms the Bible, and
Okay.
they compare that to like archaeological evidence that New York was real doesn't prove Spider-Man was,
Mm, mm.
which is dumb, but it's only mythicists do that. But yeah,
I mean,
so
is it dumb?
well, like so let's consider like John's gospel.
Right.
He mentions Solomon's colonnade and Solomon's portico, which were parts of the temple complex. Um, and he mentions in like the pool of Siloam, and there's all kinds of details about
Right.
like local features that you would only know if you lived there. Um, Like it's not like today where you can go on Google Maps and go like take a virtual tour of
Right.
anywhere on the
Right.
planet. You couldn't go down to the local library and read up like a a traveler a tourist guide to Jerusalem in the first century. Like these kinds of details, and they're incidental details. Like they're not things that um they're not part of the Jesus mythos
But
in
even,
any.
yeah, like even in the 90s, right? If somebody told a story about San Diego, I could easily read that story or watch that movie and be like, motherfucker, you never been to San Diego. There was my daughter Aubrey was in a play when she was in high school in England, and it was a show that took place in America. It was like a
Yeah,
back to the 80s type show.
and we're
And
all
this,
eating Vegemite sandwiches,
yeah,
right?
in the dialogue, and I'm like, Aubrey, you should correct them. This is how I do. I'm just tell them that that's not what we say, and you're an authority on this. I know you're only 13, but you are an authority on the dialect of American, and
Yeah,
it's your duty to do a back to the 80s play without stupid Britishisms.
there's this really great example of a like anyway in the I think it's in Mark 7. He's going from I think Caesarea Philippi to Galilee. I'm just making this up because I don't remember the
Sure. Yeah,
exact
yeah.
place. But he in the narrative, I think he's at Caesarea Philippi. Um, and it says that they were leaving to go back to Galilee. Um, they went north towards Tyre, which is the opposite direction to get to Galilee. And skeptics for years and years and years. I even got into like a heated argument with an atheist over this. Like this proves that the author of Mark had never stepped foot in Israel, because anyone can look at a map and see that like Galilee is south of Caesarea Philippi, and they went north toward Tyre, which is in the opposite direction. Um, Thing is, there's a big frickin' mountain in the way. So you have to go north toward Tyre to get around it to go down to Galilee. Um, and like that
So who's
argument,
never been there?
right? So
Mark or you?
the argument actually underscores the fact that Mark or the person he was getting dictation from, which was Peter, had
Right.
definitely been to Israel, because you actually can't get that information from a I don't think they had topo maps in first
Uh,
century. I think that's
no.
pretty new. But they knew
Yeah, I
you had to
mean,
go around the mountain to get there.
even something in 1500 would be new to them, right? Like, so, like, what are we saying here? Crazy people.
World's gotten weird.
The world has gotten weird.
Speaking of weird, what's your beef with Paul, man?
Well, man, oh, my beef with Paul.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so uh in all seriousness, I know that Paul is considered by Christians an apostle. So, with that in mind, you'll probably see me be a lot more reverent than you have in past shows. I'm not in the business or in the habit of being offensive just to be offensive. Maybe that's not so true, but uh, so, but when it comes to like real things like religion, I mean, you've already seen me, defend, the Mormon Church, Jehovah's Witnesses, and whatnot. So, um, I put that I put the sensitive topic into that category. Not to mention, I'm speaking to my friend who is very pious, uh, and I would
I'm
say
very pious.
is a
I'm probably the most pious person I know.
right.
Humility. I like it. I too am extraordinarily humble.
And much like Paul, most boastful too. So I just, you know, okay, that's my one shot. That's my so,
That's okay.
yeah,
That is like that's a when you bring it up, like when I consider like how do I talk about Joseph Smith to
right,
Mormons
right,
or Muhammad to
right,
Muslims,
right,
I don't go out of my way to be offensive,
right.
but I will state plainly false prophets shouldn't listen to them. Not good
Because it's what
guys.
you believe, right? It's who you are. It's like deep into your DNA, and it's what you not only believe but know to be true. If correct me if I'm mischaracterizing you there.
Well, I mean, all of that is true, but you know, I'm tempted to get into a discussion about like, is it valid because I believe it, or is it valid because it's true? And we tend to, it's probably a different podcast, but maybe that's an issue here, but I don't know that it would be worth going into that. So I'll just table that for another discussion maybe. But but yeah, so you were saying about Paul.
So I guess I mean the main question is how do we know that he's an apostle? We'll just start there, and
Okay.
I'll kind of give you the floor with a little introduction to Paul.
All right. Well, to answer your question, I would say that the shortest evidence that he's an apostle is that the rest of the apostles vouched for him. Um, they did not disavow him. They didn't condemn him as a phony or as an imposter. And if they were fooled by Paul, if he really was a phony and they were fooled by him, well, you kind of have to question. their credibility about any of it. Um, like it's hard to take Christianity itself seriously if its founders were so easily taken in by a false apostle. But I will also say that from an epistemological standpoint, from an apologetic standpoint, as far as considering what early Christians believed and why they believed it, I think you could approach the New Testament as historical data, presupposing that Paul is a phony. This and the central claims of Christianity still come through. Um, which I realize sounds somewhat contradictory.
No,
Um,
in fact, for what last 10 years or so, we've been talking about this subject, and I think that's uh, where Matt falls with me. He's like, you don't have to, man. Like, let's just say we take every single letter of Paul out. Where does that leave you? It leaves you in the same place. So I don't
well,
like.
but even with Paul's letters and like just consider like let's for the sake of argument say he was a phony.
Mhm.
Much of what he did was like it wasn't original to him. Like I think he had his own way of communicating things. I think he was brilliant in understanding and expositing the scriptures. But a lot of the value you get from Paul is you could take out any consideration of divine authority delegated to him by Jesus and just take his arguments on their merits on the one hand, but also all of the data that he provides about early Christian traditions and hymns. Like 1 Corinthians 15 is a prime example. Now, brothers, I want to remind you of what I preach of the gospel I preached to you, which you received, on which you have taken your stand. By this gospel you were saved, if you hold firm to the word I preached to you. For what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance. And then he gives them this creed about how the Messiah died for their sins according to the scriptures. He was buried. He was raised again on the third day according to the scriptures. He appeared to Cephas, then to 12, then to 500, then to James, then to all the apostles. Whether then it was I or they, this is what we preached, and this is what you believed. So, like, you can just treat Paul as the messenger, and you have this very early Christian tradition.
So is it a quibble of mine or a quibble of somebody if he kind of got the order wrong on who he appeared to? Because he conveniently lives out women.
Well, but that's the thing. He didn't get the order wrong. He didn't come up with that. He's not trying to tell you I, Paul, was an eyewitness to all of these appearances. He claims to be an eyewitness in this line of eyewitnesses, but he's not claiming to be the originator of this creed. He's claiming to have gotten this creed from other Christians, presumably when he met with Peter and James in Jerusalem, as he reports in the Epistle to the Galatians. That's when he received this, and also, not to change the subject, but other examples of these creeds that he preserves for us. You got
Sure.
Philippians 2, which is a hymn. Um, there's the one in First Timothy about how he appeared in glory. He was I forget the rest of it, but he was
Sure.
seen by angels and vindicated in
But
the spirit, that kind of thing. But
how do you okay, how do you reconcile that, what you just said, how he got information probably from the apostles when he met with them in Jerusalem, um, with he received none from no man. So what I teach you is nothing I got from somebody. I got it from Christ, uh,
right,
not from any
like
man.
you're talking about in Galatians where he says,
Right.
let's look at the act like what he actually says and go from there. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Galatians 1. I'm astonished that you are so quickly deserting the one who called you to live in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel, which is really no gospel at all. Evidently, some people are throwing you into confusion or trying to pervert the gospel of Christ. But even if we are an angel from verse 11, I want you to know, brothers, that the gospel I preach is not of human origin. I did not receive it from any man, nor was I taught it. Rather, I received it by revelation from Jesus Christ. And so he's talking about his encounter on the road to Damascus, which is related in Acts 9, where he's on his way to Damascus with some arrest warrants in his hand. He's going to go round up some Christians, and he's been killing Christians. He presided over Stephen's martyrdom, and Jesus appears to him. A great light appeared to him. It's not in front of me, so I might get some
Right.
details
No, no, yeah,
wrong.
yeah.
But so he's referring to that. So basically this
So he's referring to that, but he's not saying that everything he says came from there, and he still received information from the what we'll call them the 12.
well, he's saying that the substance of the gospel, the message itself, he got that directly from Jesus Christ.
Are you are you are you sure that's what he's saying?
What do you think he's saying?
I think he's saying that I think he's marginalizing apostles. I think that especially in Galatians that there's a major rift between him and the Jerusalem assembly, and because doesn't he start that with like, hey, who's bewitched you, and who is he talking about when he talks about if you received another gospel? I think he's talking about the delegation that James sent down to meet him, Barnabas and Peter.
Um, okay. So yeah, he's probably talking about them. Um,
So
but what about that makes you think he is disparaging other apostles as apostles? Like, and by disparaging, what do you mean by that? Like, is he saying their legitimacy as apostles? It like that they're not legitimate as apostles. What they preach is
I think
bad,
I think he's
or
I think he's more defensive on the apostles, maybe. So you said the apostles vouch for him. I It seems to me because he talks about some kind of certification, right? It looks like there was some teaching that was going on, and James is like, you know what? No, no more of that unless they're vouched for by me. So I don't know if that's
well,
Corinthians or if that's Galatians where he talks about he's like, well, the only certification I need is when I brought this church up, that I'm on your hearts, that I taught you this, I taught you that.
I think it would help to look at the actual passage you're talking about,
Okay.
to kind of unpackage what he's saying, because it's like I don't want to look at a situation and speculate about what was going on behind the scenes when there's information that's stated that we need to work from. As far as Galatians, like he does, of course, report a conflict with Peter. But I mean, just to clarify what
It
he's
wasn't it
saying,
wasn't just a conflict with Peter though,
well, let's
because the delegation comes down, he rebukes Peter, but this is Paul's testimony on this. But so the whoever came as James' men and Peter and Barnabas, so it sounds to me like Paul was the one rebuked, but he's the one writing a letter and defending himself, and we don't get the Jew side of this rift.
well, let's look at what he actually says first, okay?
Okay.
Um, what he's saying in Galatians 1 is, let's see. I want you to know, brothers, the gospel I preached is not of human origin. I did not receive it from any man, nor was I taught it. Rather, I received it by revelation from Jesus Christ. So he's talking about the road to Damascus, and he's talking about the substance of the gospel, the message of like the content of it, not any particular phrasing of it, not a particular creed. It's expected, of course, that the other apostles would have would have been preaching the gospel independently of Paul. Um, they would have a certain it, it's it, they would I think they would have had I think it would have been instituted in a kind of formal creed by then. Like I think that's reasonable to assume. It's also not reasonable to expect that what the exact wording that Paul might use on any given occasion on his own, having received it directly from Jesus Christ, would necessarily be the exact wording that the original 12
Well, I mean,
apostles were using.
I don't think that John or Peter would use the same wording necessarily, just because.
Well, I do think that the creed that you find in First Corinthians 15, I do think that was a standardized wording.
Fair enough.
Because he starts out, well, one, he mentions appearing to Cephas, the 12, the 500, James, all the apostles. Last of all, he appeared to me also. But whether then it was I or they, this is what we preached, and this is what you believed. And he also starts off that letter by kind of laying into them for forming cliques around which apostle or teacher had initiated them. Um, and then he kind of spends the first couple chapters rebuking them for this on the premise that it doesn't matter which of them initiated you, we're all preaching the same thing. Um, all of that, and I can go into this more if I haven't like supported it well enough yet.
No,
But all of this tells me that the creed in First Corinthians 15 was a standardized creed by which they initiated new believers, which as we read Galatians, like the gospel as he received it was not of mortal origin. He received it from Jesus Christ directly, but then he reports that let me go on a bit from did not receive it from any man, nor was I taught it, rather received it by revelation from Jesus Christ. For you have heard of my previous way of life in Judaism, how intensely I persecuted the church of God and tried to destroy it. I was advancing in Judaism beyond many. We know the details of his story. Um, but when God, who set me apart from my mother's womb and called me by his grace, was pleased to reveal his son in me so that I might preach him among the Gentiles, my immediate response was not to consult any human being. I did not go up to Jerusalem to see those who were apostles before I was, but I went into Arabia. Later, I returned to Damascus. Then, after 3 years, I went up to Jerusalem to get acquainted with Cephas and stayed with him 15 days. I saw none of the other apostles, only James, the Lord's brothers. I assure you before God that what I'm writing was no lie. Um, then I went to Syria and Cilicia, and I was personally unknown to the churches. But he does report that he went to Jerusalem, and the word for that's translated to get acquainted with Cephas. It's the Greek is astoriosante or something along those lines. It's the same root that from which we get the word history. It literally means like to interrogate or interview. So he's not just hanging out with Peter or getting he's not there to get acquainted with Peter as a person. He's there to ask him about the gospel. He's like he's there to kind of compare notes with him. Um, and this is presumably when he would have received that creed, if not earlier, but he's at least conferring with Peter, the foremost among the apostles, and they apparently were on the same page. This was apparently a good meeting. And so they're all, simpatico at this point. But
I mean, I would think. I mean, they know that this dude was arresting Christians, and he was there when Stephen was stoned.
yeah.
So how how gracious would Peter have to be to like listen to this dude? One, how humble must Paul have been to even approach him with this information? Like, hey, I know that I'm this guy to you. So that's super interesting to me how gracious Peter is to even take this guy in and to bring him before James. That's kind of crazy, actually.
Yeah, and the Acts 9 gives kind of another angle to this, which is not in the interest of advancing an argument, but just kind of adding to your point. I think it's kind of cool how they don't they clear like Luke and Paul clearly didn't like compare notes to get their story straight on this. But it's still, they kind of reinforce each other in a cool way. Acts chapter 9, after he goes to Ananias and is then Ananias went. This is after he was blinded on the road to
Right.
Damascus, and he went to the house of Ananias. Um, Ananias went to the house and entered it, placing his hands on Saul. He said, "Brother Saul, the Lord Jesus, who appeared to you on the road as you were coming here, has sent me so that you may see again and be filled with the Holy Spirit." Immediately, something like scales fell from Paul's eyes, and he could see again. He got up and was baptized, and after taking some food, he regained his strength. So it's just he was filled with the Holy Spirit at the laying on of Ananias's hands. Then he was baptized. Saul spent several days with the disciples in Damascus. At once he began to preach in the synagogues that Jesus is the Son of God. All those who heard him were astonished and asked, "Isn't he the man who raised havoc in Jerusalem among those who call on this name? Hasn't he come here to take them as prisoners to the chief priests?" Yet Saul grew more and more powerful and baffled the Jews living in Damascus by proving that Jesus is the Messiah. After many days had gone by, there was a conspiracy among the Jews to kill him. But Saul learned of their plan. Day and night they kept close watch on the city gates in order to kill him. But his followers took him by night and lowered him in a basket through an opening in the wall. When he came to Jerusalem, he tried to join the disciples, but they were all afraid of him, not believing that he really was a disciple. But Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles. He told them how Saul and his journey had seen the Lord and that the Lord had spoken to him, and how in Damascus he had preached fearlessly in the name of Jesus. So Saul stayed with them and moved about freely in Jerusalem, speaking boldly in the name of the Lord. He talked and debated, and so like that's apparently the same event, but Luke just kind of he doesn't give a lot of details about it. He just says he met with the apostles. Saul himself reports he met none of the apostles besides Peter and James, the Lord's brother, which qualifies as the apostles, but
Yeah,
it's
right.
but it's this is presumably, well, not presumably, all that, like that would have been when that meeting took place, but it was, it was that there was drama that ensued that Paul doesn't get into in Galatians, but anyway, so
So
we haven't gotten into the conflict yet, but did you have anything to add before we go into that, or
no,
did
it's
you?
still in conflict.
Okay, so Galatians. So Paul talks about after 14 years went to Jerusalem. That he in Galatians 2 he's talking about when he went to Jerusalem. I think this is the events of Acts 15 when they had the council
Right.
in
I was
Jerusalem.
that was like the next subject for me.
Okay, do you want to
And I
get
think
into
and I
that?
think I think this is tied.
Yeah.
So it's odd to me that Paul would mention that I don't know if did he say he was the first to kind of go talk to Gentiles, or he was commissioned to go talk to Gentiles?
I don't think
Because
it's I don't think it
because
said he
because
was the first.
Peter's documented as doing so. In fact, that was the whole thing with Peter and the sheet and the food and the
Yeah.
right. And we talked about that in a former episode. Um, and then but the main point of contention was the circumcision, right? And so they brought that before James, and James is like, okay, look, you gotta keep the law, but as a starter pack, if you want to go bring people in to become disciples, we can't make it too hard on them. As they listen more, they'll get more out of what it is that we teach. So he had the four like purity laws, right? So the blood, the sexual morality, the meat being sacrificed to idols, and the strangulation. I think those are the four.
Well, I want to correct you on one point.
Okay,
It's Acts 15. Then some of the believers who belonged to the party of the Pharisees stood up and said the Gentiles must be circumcised and required to keep the law of Moses.
right.
So the bottom line is the bottom line of the controversy is, do Gentiles have to convert to Judaism in order to be Christians? Which itself is a fascinating topic to me, considering how we think of Christianity and Judaism as being mutually exclusive today. But at the time, the very first
Right.
controversy was it was presupposed that you have to be Jewish to be a Christian. But just as an aside,
But what does it mean to be Jewish? So
well, that's what
Jesus
he
said in order to be saved, you have to keep the commandments.
well,
Like,
to be saved in what sense though? Well, how about
well, I mean, I
let's
don't know what sense is there? Did you have to keep the commandments or not to get into the kingdom of heaven?
um
And I think
I
James
want to address
reiterates that
that.
in Acts 15. He says, "Hey, we got to keep the commandments."
Well, let's
But but you can't
yeah.
introduce people to all of our Jewish commandments. That's not going to help.
Well,
And so,
and to be fair, Paul never said you don't have to keep the commandments. Paul talked about Paul contrasted faith against the works of the law. Like meaning, do you keep the law in order to justify yourself, or are you saved by grace through faith? But he described that, but he raised the criticism people raise against him. Does it mean that we are opposed to the law? By no means. By faith, we uphold the law. And he talked about the obedience of faith. Like the distinction is not that like James told people to obey the law and Paul said not to. James and Paul are actually saying the same thing. They're just coming at it from different angles. Um, the question is, do you obey the law because it's an
I think
external code
I
that you're
think those
trying to justify
angles
yourself
are
by?
kind of fundamental, though. I mean, Paul calls the law constraining slavery, basically, like
Well,
where James says that the law is freedom.
where does what does Paul say exactly? Like, because I think it's important to look at his exact words instead of kind of characterizing them ourselves.
Okay. Uh,
But the Jerusalem Council, while you're looking, do you mind if I
yeah, go ahead.
um let's see. The Pharisees said the Gentiles must be circumcised and required to keep the law of Moses. The apostles and elders met to consider this question. After much discussion, Peter got up and addressed them. Brothers, you know that some time ago God made a choice among you that the Gentiles might hear from my lips the message of the gospel and believe. God, who knows the heart, showed that he accepted them by giving the Holy Spirit to them, just as he did to us. By the way, like giving the Holy Spirit to someone, like that's just as an aside, maybe this is another show topic, but that's a way bigger deal than we often treat it like it is in church. It's kind of part of our Christian parlance, but it's actually like this is tantamount to the glory cloud of God's presence descending upon the temple in the Torah on the tabernacle in the Torah, and it's this terrifying, glorious event that we speak of somewhat casually with regard to ourselves. And anyway, that's a different
I
topic, but
I 100% agree with you.
yeah,
I think that we do use it way too flippant and um and that it's just it's so matter of fact. It's like, oh, it happens all the time. That's what we and I don't think that's true. I don't think we're reverent enough about the Holy Spirit. In fact, I think we had like a didn't we have an episode on kind of I think I read a book one time. It's called the Lost God, and it was about the Holy Spirit
mm,
and how he's just completely slighted all the time. Like like why are we talking we speak so reverently about the Father and the Son, but the Holy Spirit's just like, yeah, all of it, everybody. Anytime I have a good idea, it's the Holy Spirit. Anytime that um I feel sort of inspired, obviously it's the Holy Spirit when it's not necessarily true. In
yeah.
my opinion, in my opinion.
Um, Yeah. So listeners, if you want a show topic on that, let us know. I'm tempted to camp out on it right now, but I got stuff to say about Paul.
We got something we got to
Yeah.
move along.
So a God who knows the heart showed that he accepted them by giving the Holy Spirit to them, just as he did to us. He did not discriminate between us and them, for he purified their hearts by faith. Now then, why do you try to test God by putting the necks of Gentiles, a yoke that neither we nor our ancestors had been able to bear? No, we believe it is through the grace of our Lord Jesus that we are saved, just as they are. So, the yoke being the law. The whole assembly became silent as they listened to Barnabas and Paul telling about the signs and wonders God had done among them, among the Gentiles through them. When they finished, James spoke up, Brothers, listen to me. Simon has described to us how God first intervened. And then he quotes the scripture about rebuilding David's fall intent. He quotes the prophets. About Gentile inclusion. It is my judgment, therefore, that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God. Instead, we should write to them telling to abstain from food polluted by idols, as in don't sacrifice to idols, i.e., don't worship other gods, from sexual immorality, from the meat of strangled animals, and from blood. For the law of Moses has been preached in every city from the earliest times and is read in the synagogues and every Sabbath. So then the apostles and elders with the whole church decided to choose some of their own. Um, I'm not going to read the whole thing because
Right.
it's tedious, but they write a letter to the churches that says, "We've heard that someone out from us without our authorization had disturbed you, troubling your mind by what they said. We all agreed to choose some men. Don't want to burden you with anything beyond the following requirements." Abstain from food sacrificed to idols, from blood, from the meat of strangled animals, and from sexual immorality. You will do well to do these things. Farewell. So, like the gist of that was that, like, no, Gentiles are not required to be circumcised, and they're not required to keep the law as a general matter, but they are required to abstain from these things. Now, the the rebuttal I anticipate is that this was Luke writing, who is a companion of Paul. So we're getting the Pauline take on the Council of Jerusalem. So I could, so perhaps that doesn't settle the argument. Um,
No, I don't think so. I think that because the way that that sounded to me was what I said earlier. Like that's the minimum. That's the minimum to start becoming a disciple, to start following what it is that we do, because the path is narrow, not wide, right? So it's hard to follow the Jesus way. But we can't just take these Hellenistic pagan people and just throw all that on top of them. So the way I saw that was James was saying, yeah, we can get that started, but these are the four things that are non-negotiable. I don't think that it's a new law for Gentiles versus Jews. I think that the whole commandments have to be fulfilled or done along the way, but you can't just like if you're learning to play a sport, you got to have the fundamentals.
so
Otherwise,
you're saying this was like Christian kindergarten, but they were going to graduate to the law
yes.
as they matured.
Now, I don't know how circumcision necessarily fits into that, but I think that the commandments more than just those four for sure.
So what are you basing that on? Why do you think that they
I had the passage and I can't.
is
It's
it in
it's
James?
no, it's in Acts. I think Acts 15. I think you just read the whole thing, but
Well, you're saying that's the bare minimum, but what is it like the idea that they were supposed to, as they matured, add to those four requirements?
well, I don't know. I just think that it's a standard for entry. And I don't think that's supposed to be that forever, where you can just do whatever the hell you want, right? Like just be moral and
Well,
those four Jewish rules, like those rules kind of protect the congregation from moral and spiritual contamination, right? So we can't just have all these pagans coming in and there's moral and spiritual contamination that could for the brothers and sisters that are already there. Um,
Well, the thing is, like, I don't, I agree with you. I don't think just keeping those four rules is the whole of the Christian life. But I think that I don't see it as them starting with that and graduating to more of the law. I think entailed in their faith to begin with is following Jesus Christ is like there's a passage in First Timothy where he mentions that the it's in chapter 1 how the law doesn't apply to righteous people. Righteous like the law applies to the unrighteous, to people who to murderers and the sexually immoral and thieves and people who dishonor their parents. The reason being, like if you put your faith in God through Jesus Christ and you have been given the Holy Spirit and you've been given a new nature and you are living by that promise and living by your love and trust in Jesus Christ, you don't have to be told don't murder, don't steal, don't do all these horrible things. You already value life so that you wouldn't like you wouldn't you don't need a law threatening to punish you if you do these things. Doing those things would be its own punishment. You'd rather be punished than do those things. That's what faith means. That's what Paul meant by the obedience of the faith. And by faith, we uphold the law. It's as in you're not doing it and to kind of take it back to its to the foundation to the what the law of Moses was in its original formulation and application. It was the national law of Israel. It was it when they were being faithful and living under the covenant, like this was the law that was enforced by the authorities, so that it wasn't living under law and being justified by the works of the law means that you're living this way because the authorities are making you. It has little to do with, I mean, if you believe in it, great, but it's really about there's a stick at your back if you disobey and a carrot in it for you if you obey. And that's how all laws and governments work. Government is coercion by threat of violence. So people live by laws because they don't want violence done to them by the state. Um, Under the new covenant, you don't live by the will of God because anybody is threatening you. You do it because you want to. You do it even if the law is telling you to disobey. You'd rather run afoul of the state than disobey God. And so I think in
yeah,
that,
but that's to me though, that's like saying, hey, we don't need any laws because you should already have laws. Like, you know what, in my house, the law doesn't pertain to me because we don't do those bad things. But we still have them. It's like saying, our Constitution, if we have the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, probably through the Fourth, do we really need the rest?
I don't see how it's saying that.
Well, I think that's how you explained it. That's what I got out of what you just said to me.
If you are, I mean, again, all of this is predicated on if you have faith in God through Jesus Christ and you have been given his spirit, then all of that follows. I mean, and the bottom line is in our sinful nature, the reason that we need laws and we need policemen to patrol with guns to threaten violence if we murder and steal, the reason that we need that is because our we're sinful by nature.
Okay, and
Um,
so why did James give those four purity laws and just say, nah, they don't have to? Because I mean, clearly, Paul, you're gonna have them, confess, their belief in Jesus Christ and the resurrection. So why do they need those purity laws?
um, well, the purity laws are what I mean. I would argue this is stuff they should have already been doing. Um,
Sure.
and
And
so
and I guess my problem with it personally is like the fruit of it. So here we are years later, and we have Christians today saying that, you know, there's a new Gentile law. and it replaces the Torah completely. And you know, when even in actually, what did he say? Moses preached in every synagogue and every Sabbath, meaning that, if they keep coming, they're going to learn the rest of God's ways over time.
Um,
But to say like, no, there's a new Gentile law, and Paul's got the Gentiles, and you old Jewish way can just do your thing, and over in the new Gentile land, there's a we don't have to do any of that because we believe in Jesus Christ.
um, I
And it
wouldn't characterize it as there's a new Gentile law. And I don't think that's not what the gist of that was. I think that's more.
I do think that Christians believe that that's true though.
If Christians believe that true, that's true. I think that they're reading
But
it very superficially, um, as Christians are wont to do. I mean, there's plenty about what modern Christians believe and practice that I would take issue with, but the problem isn't because Paul misled them; it's because they've misunderstood Paul. Um, but I feel like I'm not. I feel like I'm not adequately addressing the.
well, and also I guess because in Galatians 2, Paul, because I mean he clearly has there's a problem with James as he sends a delegation down.
Okay, let's
Um,
look at that because that follows chronologically after
sure.
the Council of Jerusalem, so it makes sense to get into
Why
that.
why does he say um uh they told me to not forget about the poor.
Wait, say that
Wait,
again.
so ask me to just remember the poor in when when he actually gave them four laws. Let's read it. Uh
Okay.
Galatians, is it Galatians 2:10?
Yeah, 210. Well, I think we had a.
Or if you think we need to back up or go someplace else, then
Well,
that's cool too.
let's Galatians 2. Let me after 14 years I went up to Jerusalem, this time with Barnabas. I took Titus with you, went in response for a revelation and meeting privately with those esteemed as leaders. I presented them the gospel that I preach among the Gentiles. I wanted to be sure I was not running and had not been running my race in vain. Yet not even Titus, who was with me, was compelled to be circumcised, even though he was a Greek. This matter arose because some false believers had infiltrated our ranks to spy on the freedom we have in Christ Jesus and to make us slaves. We did not give in to them for a moment so that the truth of the gospel might be preserved for you. So that's that's talking about the situation that the Council of Jerusalem was addressing. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So as for those who are held in high esteem, whatever they were makes no difference to me. God does not show favoritism. They added nothing to my message. On the contrary, they recognized that I have been entrusted with the task of preaching the gospel to the uncircumcised, just as Peter had been to the circumcised. For God, who was at work in Peter as an apostle to the circumcised, was also at work in me as an apostle to the Gentiles. So just to note, like he's not delegitimizing Peter's apostleship; he's affirming it. James, Cephas, and John, those esteemed as pillars, gave me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship. When they recognized the grace given to me, they agreed that we should go to the Gentiles and they to the circumcised. All they asked was that we should continue to remember the poor, the very thing I had been eager to do all along.
But that's not all they asked. That's a lie.
So, okay.
The,
Well,
we
I
just went
mean,
over the four things that James said you have to do. And then he says, yeah, we agreed to go over this and do this place.
well,
And
he's,
I,
but
I
he's,
go here, you go there, and all he asked me to do was remember the poor. That's not true.
um, well, he's talking about their guidance and instruction to him personally. Nothing he said there precludes that they gave him a letter to distribute to to the Gentile churches. In fact, Paul himself preached against eating food sacrificed to idols, preached against sexual immorality. He often quoted the law to instruct believers in how to behave. So, I mean, just because Paul doesn't give an exhaustive accounting of everything that happened in Jerusalem, he's only talking about the things that happened that are germane to the point that he's making, which is that his gospel is valid and from God, and that he had been accepted by the apostles, that he was, despite his past, he was accepted as one of them. And so the gospel he's preaching is just as valid as what they're preaching because it's the same gospel. Um, so I don't think that's a fair characterization to say he's lying.
Well, I think that then there's a contradiction in Scripture.
What's the contradiction?
The contradiction is he said they only ask that
Um,
I think the four purity laws is germane to this conversation or germane
well,
to what he's talking about
you're
there.
calling them purity laws, but that's your
Well,
own characterization.
that's I mean that's for brevity. I could say the four rules that are, the minimal Gentile law, if you will, that James handed down.
Yeah, but I mean, that's not a nitpick. Like referring to them as purity laws, it suggests that this is operating like a law. It's just
Okay.
a stripped down version of the law that that doesn't that kind of bypasses the whole
Okay,
idea of salvation by grace through faith
fine.
that
Four rules to get them started. And
which I think are more like guidelines that are that's consistent with what they're already doing, like to avoid confusion. Like, because the issue was people were saying in order to be a Christian, you got to be circumcised, you got to convert to Judaism, basically. You've got to adopt the way of life that we've had since Moses, which includes circumcision, eating kosher, like you can't eat bacon or shellfish, you can't wear mixed fabrics, you can't, and so and I think it's worth getting into what those laws were for. Um, to kind of to frame this situation. When you read those laws, you have all of these laws that are what Christians have referred to as the moral laws, like the Ten Commandments,
mhm.
um, which like every Christian agrees to just as a matter of having faith in God through Jesus Christ. You don't worship other gods. You don't misuse his name. We don't take the Sabbath itself that seriously, but we do set apart a day as holy, which is Sunday, which is why to go to church on Sunday, even though the Sabbath is Saturday. There are reasons for that, but I
Right.
would argue that for all intents and purposes, we keep that
And
with
and
Sunday.
and those commandments were reiterated by the walking, talking Jesus during,
Well,
his little time on earth.
to be fair, Jesus reiterated the entire Torah. Um, so um, but it's also important to remember that. Sorry, did you say something?
No, I'm like, well, yeah, but he specifically said, those Ten Commandments.
Well, and I'm agreeing with you, and I'm even like conceding the whole bag that he affirmed the Torah. Do not
Okay,
think I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I've not come to
sure.
abolish them, but to fulfill them. That's worth unpackaging a little more. But to go back to the other laws that are under discussion here. The purpose of those laws, as you read them in Leviticus, is to set them apart as God's people. Don't be like the Gentiles who did all of these things in the nations that I'm driving out before you. You're to be set apart for me. Therefore, you are not to eat any food that is set apart for you as unclean. And you have all of, and if just like reading Leviticus and getting into the mindset of it's to create this mindset of, keeping like things in the right categories. Don't plant different kinds of seeds in the same field. They keep them separate in their own fields. Don't wear mixed fabrics. Don't, um, so on and so forth. Don't eat the way Gentiles eat. So you can't eat with Gentiles, and this is to prevent cultural contamination. It's to keep them from adopting Gentile ways. If you can't eat with them, if you can't dress like them, if you can't groom yourself like them, if you can't do agriculture like them, that's going to prevent you from mixing with them and adopting their customs.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean that's why, as a child when I was a Jehovah's Witness, you couldn't play with worldly kids because they would rub off on you.
yeah,
They love that verse, bad association spoils useful habits.
yeah.
Um, that's a big one that the J does espouse. Um,
But just to be clear, there was nothing intrinsically wrong with eating bacon or wearing mixed fabrics. It was to it was a sort of artificial holiness to frame their mindset to genuine holiness, to be set apart from God. We're not even going to be like them culturally, and that's what they were. They were cultural signifiers to keep them distinct as a people. But with the death and resurrection of the Messiah, the the law of Moses was fulfilled in the person of Jesus Christ, and now Judaism was packaged for export, so to speak. Like the reason for the separation had been completed, and there was no longer any need for that. And that's why Peter had his vision of the animals lowered on the sheets, and God told him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." Um, right before he was sent to the home of a Gentile to preach the gospel.
because now you're supposed to mix because
Yeah,
they're all my people now. So you're not going to be culturally in danger as long as you have faith in me.
exactly. Um, and so against that
Which
backdrop,
is which is why you're allowed to hang out with me. So,
because I'm not Jewish.
oh, well,
Wait, are you Jewish?
I'm not Jewish.
Okay.
Oh, we're talking about Jews? Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so when I was in the Marine Corps in Okinawa, there was this missionary who had a house off base called the Hanson Christian Center, and we'd all go hang out there, and it was a way to get off base and do Bible studies and watch like Bible movies and just kind of like be away from the Marine Corps, and it was great. But I was in his office. We were just kind of hanging out talking about something. If you've ever been to Okinawa, there are geckos everywhere. They they come in and they just kind of live in the house, and
Yep.
you don't even notice them anymore. But
They're for good luck.
yeah,
They're a good
so
luck creature.
so me and this missionary Drew, we were just kind of talking, and then a gecko skittered across the wall, and then he just stopped mid sentence. He goes, "Oh, hey, we can eat those now."
Yikes.
And referring to the Leviticus law, and it
Right,
was
right, right.
it was
That's
it's funny. And
that's I mean Christian jokes are funny.
and then I pointed out, like, we're not Jewish, dude. We could always eat those.
You can always
And
eat.
but anyway, so it was against that backdrop that the council in Jerusalem happened. And so, like, uh, uh, my reading of those four guidelines was basically, which, by the way, all of those were: don't eat blood, don't eat strangled animals. That's pretty much consistent with the covenant of Noah, where God told humanity through Noah that everything that lives and moves and has the breath of life in it is given to you for food. As I gave you the green plants before the flood, now I give you everything. Only do not eat the blood, or food with the blood in it, for the life is in the blood. And in Leviticus, it emphasizes how they're not to consume the blood because the life is in the blood, and the blood is given for the atonement of their sins. That's reserved for God, but the meat is theirs. Um, so basically, these are universal constraints, but they're not part of like a cup. They're not laws in the sense that they're part of a covenant that they live under as a nation. They're kind of they're probably just sort of the closest thing to like cultural signifiers that Christians have. But the point isn't that do this and you'll be justified before God. It's more do this and you're living consistently with Christian ethics. But the idea of like justification wasn't even like the stated reason wasn't even justification and salvation from sin. I think it was more about cultural signification. Um, but but anyway, to the idea that Paul was being like the idea that Paul was being dishonest by leaving that out, I don't think that stands up. It's just that wasn't germane to the point that he was making. Um, like the point is that they validated his message. They didn't they didn't tell him, no, you've got this message wrong. You have to change it. They told him, keep doing the same thing you're doing. Hey, just don't forget about poor people. Um,
So what's the rift then?
what's the rift between him and James? Well, I think like, you want to just go on in the passage?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Starting with verse 11, when Cephas, and this is after, he reiterates his experience in Jerusalem. Um, they were all simpatico. They affirmed his message, patted him on the back, said, "Attaboy, keep going." Um, when Cephas came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. For before certain men came from James, he used to eat with the Gentiles. But when they arrived, he began to draw back and separate himself from the Gentiles because he was afraid of those who belonged to the circumcision group. Presumably, the people from the circumcision group were men who came from James. Um, in what sense they came from James, I think is open to interpretation. He doesn't say James sent them to make sure everybody gets circumcised. I think that would be a leap.
No, he was just saying they were Jews, right? The
Well,
circumcised.
but
I,
well, when he says belong to the circumcision group, I maybe as uh, maybe I was reading that wrong. Now that you mention it, I took it to mean they were among those who were trying to
the
get
ones that were like,
Gentile.
well, why would Peter be afraid of them when James made his edict and Peter was there? And like, I think that perhaps Paul is mischaracterizing Peter here. There has to be something else that happened other than they're just eating with them and it's not kosher
Um,
because Peter already can eat with Gentiles in
well,
Acts.
that doesn't mean that Peter is immune to peer pressure, that he's immune to falling back into his cultural patterns that he's used to growing up. I mean, you could like from the episode in Acts when God himself told him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." Peter's first response is revulsion. Never, Lord. I've never eaten anything unclean. He's talking to
But
God who just told,
that's his first response.
sure.
But then he did listen to God. So why would he just go back on God? Peter,
But what does that first
like
response reveal about him, though?
that he has customs and courtesies that he grew up with.
That they're deeply ingrained customs that
Right.
Um, and those aren't always easy to shake. And I don't, and maybe Peter didn't consciously decide, I'm sick of these Gentiles. I'm not sure I buy into this, even though God told me. I mean, it's entirely plausible. And again, I don't know. I'm just going with what's read. Something, according to Paul, motivated Peter to withdraw from Gentiles and stick and only eat with Jews. I don't think it takes much imagination to figure out why, considering how deeply ingrained this taboo, which is what it was. It was a taboo against eating with Gentiles. Um,
Or or did James find out that Peter was letting people eat meat sacrificed to idols? That Paul was.
is there a reason to think that?
Well, he is. So why would like
Wait,
why else would why I think because if you because it's one of the four rules. So that's one reason why I think that would be. He broke one of these rules, if not three of them.
Wait,
That's why I think.
back up. He being Peter?
So no, he being Paul. So Paul is teaching these people. Peter shows up, eating with them, doesn't know that they're not abiding by whatever. These people come down and said, "Hey, James told us that this guy's actually letting them." We'll just say one of these rules, like I think that this is just as easy to imagine as my man just feeling peer pressure.
I
It's
don't
like, hey,
I don't think that's true at all. I mean, I think
why?
well, I mean, you have the epistle to the Hebrews where, well, one, as a general rule, people are deeply conditioned by their upbringing and their customs, especially when those are religious customs. People will um um it's something they feel in their bones, even when they're not, even when they know it's not rational, they still kind of default to those patterns. But also you have the epistle to the Hebrews, where you have a whole group of Christians who are apparently feeling this way, like they're kind of reverting to their Judaism, so that they need this whole book of the Bible written to explain to them why those customs are obsolete and why going back to them is a regression. So I don't think that's unrealistic. But what we do know, just on the face of it, Peter had some motivation to do that, and it doesn't take that much imagination to imagine what that motivation to see what that motivation could have been. Meanwhile, I don't see any evidence to suggest that Paul was letting people eat food sacrificed to idols, or was well,
He does in Corinthians.
um, well, it's conditional. Yeah, I think that's a fair point that um,
Because
he
it was
did.
it wasn't it was enough that he broke off from Barnabas. So what rift could it have been
Well,
that Barnabas would ditch him there?
so but to be clear, it doesn't say Barnabas broke off because of that reason.
I
You're
no, I
speculating.
that's why I said what reason could it be?
Okay.
And I don't think it's because they ate with Gentiles. That's not a good enough reason for Barnabas, who brought Paul in, to have a big enough dispute where they would separate ways. It would have to be something bigger than that. Would you agree?
Um, well, let's see what it says. Like I don't like
Well, I don't think it does say. It says they had a disagreement and he bailed.
well, I think it said he refused to go with them to a certain, hold on.
This little chick is Nina, and she's got a big thumb. She's got a weird paws, and
Oh,
she acts like she's starving to death, even though she eats. But maybe her metabolism is really fast, and I don't actually
mm,
deal with cats, but I have nobody here but me, so it's just me, this cat, my dogs,
mm,
and for some reason the cat wants to because I have cheese with me. That's why.
mm. My pet lion never wants to get in my lap while I'm podcasting.
She's actually pretty funny because she likes to be scratched like a dog. She comes when you call her name like a dog. She runs around in circles when you have food like a dog. Like I think she doesn't understand that she's a cat. So
So in Acts 15, sometime later, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let us go back and visit the believers in all the towns where we preach the word of the Lord and see how they are doing." Barnabas wanted to take John, also called Mark, with them, but Paul did not think it was wise to take him because he had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not continued with them in the work. They had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company. Barnabas took Mark and sailed for Cyprus. Paul chose Silas and left, commended the believers by the grace of the Lord. He went through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches.
so it was over John Mark.
Yeah. Um, But yeah, I would say I agree that Paul instructing the Corinthians that food sacrificed to idols is like he tells them not to eat it if somebody says he doesn't tell them explicitly, yeah, go ahead and eat food sacrificed to idols. He tells them
He tells them
eat,
that idols aren't real and that it
right?
doesn't matter, but be sensitive to people that could be stumbled.
Well, the
Right.
specific instruction he gives is eat whatever is put before you without raising questions of conscience. If they tell you, though, hey, this is sacrificed to Zeus, don't eat it. Not because the idol has power, because it's a block of wood some guy made, but for that other person's conscience, so that they don't see you, a believer in Christ, eating food sacrificed to idols and think, oh, Christians can indeed eat food sacrificed to idols. So he is keeping with the instructions given at the Council of Jerusalem. He's just not.
He's doing the don't ask, don't tell policy.
Um, okay, so
Yeah.
I
So,
mean, is he did he tell people go ahead and eat food that you know has been sacrificed to idols?
no.
Okay, so he's certainly not affirming that you should eat food sacrificed to idols. He's just saying it doesn't matter if you do, and if you eat it unaware, you're not going to be possessed by a demon. You're not going to be rejected by God. But if you eat food that somebody tells you has been sacrificed to an idol, the danger is not you get possessed by a demon or God rejects you, but that somebody will think that it's okay for Christians to worship idols because they'll.
So why was Paul possessed by a demon?
So
I'm serious. In Second Corinthians, he's got the thorn in his flesh, right?
yeah,
Demon. He requests that Jesus remove it 3 times.
that's not,
It doesn't. Is that not a demon? What is he talking about there?
why would you think it's a demon?
Well, what is it? I think he says demon. Does he not?
He doesn't say it's a demon. Nobody knows what it is.
Oh, what the fuck,
I mean, it could be
dude?
anything. One, I don't think a Christian definitionally cannot be possessed by demons. Um, I don't care what charismatic preachers say. That church I was going to early in the year where they're a little cult, where I was describing them as a little bit culty.
Mhm.
Yeah, they teach that exorcism is only for Christians because there's no point in exorcising demons from non-Christians, which is totally nonsensical. But no, a demon cannot dwell in the presence of God. Um, it cannot dwell in a believer where God Himself dwells. That would there the implications of that are
Oh, he does say it's a demon. He's the messenger of Satan to torment me. Is that
yeah.
not a demon?
I don't think it's
An
necessary.
angel of Satan?
I don't think a
What else
messenger of
could that
Satan
be,
is
Brian?
necessarily a demon. Um, a messenger of Satan could be a person, could be a circumstance. I mean, Job got all kinds of messages from Satan, but none of them were demons. Um, like,
A thorn in the flesh that he identified as the messenger of Satan. It's part of his like what else does that mean? That his ribs hurt and damn it, could
well,
it be
a,
Satan?
a, well, a thorn in the flesh is an idiom meaning some
It
some
could be
impediment,
a
some
dude that won't leave him alone, keeps walking around with him. It's like get this guy like
maybe
it's
he
kind of
had
like
maybe he had a chronic illness.
because he did have the who's that woman who was that girl who was like a I don't want to say priestess of Apollos, but she like the Python, and
She
then
was she was yeah, she was a medium. She
she
had a a
hung out with him too
spiritist.
long and kept saying that he talks about it. He's like finally like, "Will you shut up? I'm gonna get this demon out of you. Get out of here and leave me alone." So it's kind of a funny episode actually.
It is pretty funny, but Paul didn't have a demon. Messenger of Satan and thorn of the flesh are both idioms that could mean a wide range of things. There's there's there's
Why is this
no
cat biting me? Why I have a messenger of Satan right here as a thorn in my flesh biting
maybe
me because
maybe
this
she's a
cat
messenger from God saying stop with this foolishness.
I, because I'm just thinking no, a Christian or somebody protected by Jesus can't have a demon. But what if it wasn't Jesus that he saw? Oh, it's not when you stab me. I'm making a point here.
Um, yeah, I suppose if we start out already knowing that Paul was a fraud, it's entirely possible that he could have a demon.
I Now I don't know if he's a fraud, but there's indications that he could possibly be a fraud. So
So
that's
are there others besides what we've discussed? Like what in our have I persuaded you that about any of these, or are you still,
no, it's better.
yeah,
It's better. I think I don't. So my relationship with Paul's been turbulent. I
yeah,
think
and
it
I don't think you we were talking before the show started about like the what Paul has meant, for you and your relationship to Christianity. I don't think you said that on while were recording though.
no, I didn't.
Do you want to get
Um,
into that, or was that just for between us?
no, I think what comes to mind is when in Matthew 24, when Jesus says, "Hey, if somebody says that that's Jesus over there in the wilderness, don't believe him. If Jesus says, I met him in the upper room, then don't believe him." And Paul did both. So to me, that's kind of a red flag. Like, hey, so Jesus says don't believe a guy with personal, and I think he calls it secret gnosis that he got from Jesus and by himself.
Well, I think you're taking what Jesus said in the wrong sense.
Really?
Um,
Because he
uh,
says the next time I appear, it's going to be everybody.
right.
Everybody's going to know.
Well, okay,
Everybody.
but let's look at the nature of like the things that he's warning about. Watch out that no one deceive. Well, first of all, they come in and they ask him. He he's walking out of the temple complex. Um, they're admiring the buildings and all the cool stuff, and he says, "I tell you the truth, not one stone here will be left on another. They will all fall down."
Right.
He predicts the destruction of the temple. Um, as Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when will this happen? And what will be the sign of the Greek as parousia, and of the end of the age? So people read the sign of your coming, and people interpret it as the second coming. Parousia means like, when are you taking power? When are you gonna assume the throne?
Okay.
Um, so they weren't asking directly about his second coming. We project that onto it because we know that's what it means, but that's not anyway. So Jesus answered, "Watch out that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, claiming I am the Messiah, and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places, et cetera, et cetera. Many false prophets will appear and deceive many people because of the increase of wickedness. The love of most will grow cold. And if those days have not been cut short, da, 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 da. At that time, if anyone says to you, 'Look, here is the Messiah,' or 'There he is,' do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. So I have told you ahead of time." So this is specifically in with regard to the they're asking what would be the sign of the fall of Jerusalem and what would be the sign of your parousia, of your advent. Um, he tells them that first of all, he about his advent, he tells them there's not going to be a sign. You're not going to see that coming. That's going to come like a thief in the night when nobody expects it. So just be ready constantly. Assume it's at any given moment that I'm going to come. But as for the fall of Jerusalem, there's going to be all kinds of people claiming to be the Messiah and to have found the Messiah. There's going to be false messiahs. They're going to try to lead you astray to these false messiahs. That is not what Paul was doing. Like Paul was telling everybody that Jesus is the Messiah. Like he was affirming the message of the apostles that Jesus is the Messiah. Whatever else Paul was doing, he was not doing what Jesus is warning about here. He was not leading people aside to false messiahs who were not Jesus. So maybe you could argue that he's a false prophet or a false teacher on other grounds, but you can't really do it based on that because he's not doing the thing that Jesus warned about, which is
I remember about a year ago, I was reading Paul's account of being struck blind, and and it just struck me like, well, um, Jesus is always opening people's eyes. He doesn't close them. So that's a weird thing. And then the times that Jesus appeared to people after he was resurrected, he always came in like person. So, you had doubting Thomas when Mary wasn't allowed to touch him because he didn't ascend to his father yet. He showed
well,
up. He,
wasn't
he
allowed to hold on to him.
right. Yeah. He chilled with the apostles,
Yeah.
gave them more instruction. There's always a person and not a revelation. But then again, John had a revelation, after, like 29 years after Paul even died. So maybe.
Well, and one, do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father. That's important. Um, there's also the fact that like these are all people he knew personally. Like he knew them
Right. So
as
Paul wouldn't
people
even
as opposed to
recognize him if he walked up on Paul. Paul would be like, "Yo, who are you?
right. But also Jesus had not
Damn, you're good
been
looking."
he had not assumed the throne yet. The ascension, when he ascended, that was Daniel's vision in chapter 7 when he had the vision of the four beasts, each being four empires. And then in my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All peoples, nations, and men of every language worshiped him. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is one that will never pass away. That was Jesus ascending to the right hand of the Father. Um, so that was Jesus being glorified in the sight of in all of the principalities and powers and the angels of God and the divine council. So yeah, when he appeared to Paul, that was after he had been enthroned over the universe and all and beyond. So yeah, he appeared in glory and he appeared in unapproachable light. Um, as one would expect, the Son of Man who sits at the right hand of the Ancient of Days. Um, and the blinding, Jesus's miracles typically had content to them, like they weren't just
Mhm.
magic tricks to prove that he's special.
Right.
Um, blinding Paul was there was content to it. It was a miracle to convey that, hey, Paul, you're blind. Um, you're this right, rising star super Jew, but you can't see the truth of the scriptures. So I'm going to blind you so that you understand your condition. And it's only when Ananias laid hands on him, um, then that the scales fell off and and he could see again. So like I think that seems exactly like the kind of thing Jesus would do. I hadn't thought about it before, but like now that you mention it, like it's that kind of makes me even more sure of Paul. So yeah, I mean, I think it's are there I feel like we didn't really like flesh out this Galatians 2 stuff to any real
Oh yeah, what
to
else?
any real
What
depth.
else?
Um, well, let's see. I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. For before certain men came from James, he used to eat with the Gentiles. But when they arrived, he began to draw back and separate himself from the Gentiles because he was afraid of those who belonged to the circumcision group. The other Jews joined him in his hypocrisy, so that by their hypocrisy, even Barnabas was led astray. Um,
Okay.
so when I saw that they were not acting in line with the truth of the gospel, I said to Cephas in front of them all, "You are a Jew, yet you live like a Gentile and not like a Jew. How is it then that you force Gentiles to follow Jewish customs? We who are Jews by birth and not sinful Gentiles know that a person is not justified by the works of the law, but by faith in Jesus Christ. So we too have put our faith in Christ Jesus so that we may be justified by faith in Christ and not by the works of the law, because by the works of the law, no one will be justified." So, and he goes on, and like we can examine more of his message if we need to, but I want to ask you, um, do you think is it well, one, are you still troubled by that? Like, does that part still make you suspicious of Paul?
It makes me, if there's a rift and I have to take a side, I'm taking the apostles' side.
Okay. All right. So is the do you think, like, as you read that, is it that you think that Paul's message, as he's stating it there, is wrong? So that whatever Peter was teaching and that he was opposed to is the correct teaching? Or do you think that Paul is right, but he's misrepresenting what Peter was stood for? Like he's slandering Peter by claiming that Peter was acting in opposition to this message when Peter in fact was not, but Paul was just inventing. Like is it the content of his message, or is it the that you disagree with, or is it that you agree with the message but think that he was misrepresenting Peter and saying he was inconsistent with it?
Well, I don't see a message other than assertions and accusations. What's the
Well,
message here? Like,
well,
so the Gentile eat like a Jew, like, and you're being a hypocrite. When
forget the personal beef with Peter in this, but like, uh, well, Paul's whole point here is that there's this gospel that we all agree to, that we're all preaching. Um, but Peter is he's not disputing with Peter, at least as he's presenting it. And let's, for the sake of argument, entertain that maybe there's something to your objection. But his point here is that there's this gospel that we all agree to, that we've all been preaching, struggling for. You, Peter, are denying it by your actions and by the way that you're treating Gentiles. Because the point is, um, we're justified by faith in Jesus Christ, not by our obedience to the law. Faith is what it's all about. That's the message. And that's what he's saying Peter is falling short of. Is it that message that you're disagreeing with? Or do you agree with that message, but think that Paul was lying about Peter, living in denial of it?
I don't-
Like I'm just trying to identify what, like, specifically what the issue is.
because it's not the last time that this happens, right? So in Second Corinthians, super defensive. He does disparage the apostles, calls them super apostles, uh, talks about chopping their penis off. Well, those are the circumcision
Well,
people.
you're
Like, I'm
you're
what?
Well, you're assuming that he's referring to the 12, which I don't think he is.
He names them. He says James, John, and Peter.
He does. I promise he doesn't.
Oh, okay.
We should go to the passage,
Okay.
but but first I want to I
I,
want to eliminate things.
I don't know what this message is in Galatians. He claims that that's what he's doing, but I don't know why Peter decided to bail from him. I don't know what that rift is.
Well,
He's saying that these are things we agree with, but apparently there's something that he doesn't agree with. What is it?
what I'm trying to narrow down though is it is your issue here that solely because of this rift with Peter, you you're suspicious of Paul, or is the message that he's preaching, is that the thing that you find fault with? Because I think that's an important distinction. And
I think that Peter finds fault with his message.
okay, so which is to say that the message as it's presented in Galatians, you're you're assuming that Peter finds fault with that, and so you're not on board with what you're reading from Paul about what the gospel is in Galatians 2.
What's the dispute of what he says here? Of what he actually says in these few paragraphs? It's pretty straightforward that everybody would agree with. Right?
Um,
So what part of the message in this passage would be something that I disagree I don't see anything I really disagree with other than I don't I don't know what Peter's side is to this. And
okay.
and there's a pattern as he has more rifts with the apostles.
Um, okay, so you're fine with the message that of what the gospel is as Paul presented in Galatians 2. It's just
He
the
doesn't say what does he say about the message? The
um
gospel I preach to you, the Gentiles. I want to be, yeah. So
so apparently from this,
they entrusted me. Well, maybe they didn't trust him. Maybe they didn't know what he was gonna say. Maybe he came to them and said, "Yeah, I'm on board with you." And then he comes out here and says this other thing, and they're like, "No, that's not it. I'm out." Like what? Because he talks about what they agreed to in Jerusalem. That's what he says here, right? Am I
yeah.
wrong? Okay, that's what they agreed to. But then what is he actually talking about? We don't know unless they say it in the next chapter.
Well, the gist of Galatians 2 and 3 is Peter and the circumcision group were pressuring Gentiles to adopt Judaism, um, which is a denial of the gospel. We who are Jews by birth and not sinful Gentiles know that a person is not justified by the works of the law, but by faith in Jesus Christ. So we too have put our faith in Christ Jesus that we may be justified by faith in Christ, not by the works of the law, but because by the works of the law, no one will be justified. And I would argue this is pretty much Jesus's entire thesis in the Sermon on the Mount. He affirms the value of the law, but then he lays out a reading of the law that is, frankly, to put it plainly, impossible for anyone to keep. You've heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not murder. Anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you, anyone who is angry with his brother is subject to judgment. Anyone who says to his brother, Raka is, or like the, I guess, ancient Aramaic for FU or something like the term of contempt, answerable to the Sanhedrin. If you say to your brother, you're a fool, you're in danger of the fires of hell. So basically, like to not value the person's life and dignity, it's on the same continuum as murdering them. You've murdered them in your heart. Um, Looking at a woman lustfully, that's another big one. Which who among us has not done that? Um, and he basically lays out this standard that is what he's teaching is the meaning of the law that proves that everybody falls short. So clearly, you cannot be justified by keeping the law. Um, so that's a perfect setup for what Paul is saying here and what Peter should have agreed with. Which I don't think that Peter was. It wasn't that he was explicitly denying that. It's not that he was going around saying Paul is wrong. You have to keep the law. I think that he was acting in a way that implied that, which he was acting in a way that was not consistent with his own stated convictions, which is something that I think, at some point most of us do. We all fall short. If we don't at some point fall short of our own standards, it means that we just have too low of standards. Unless we're uncommonly morally pure, which I am not, and very few people, if any, are. Um, so yeah, this is a time when Peter was not living consistently with his own stated convictions, and it was because of his influence, it was having a destructive effect on the church, and Paul called him out for it. But yeah, so that's I kind of lost track of the point that I was rebutting, but I think all the stuff I'm saying is relevant to the broader issue, but I kind of lost track of the specific point. But to your question, like that's the gospel that Paul is laying out in Galatians 2 and 3. You're not justified by keeping the terms of the law, you're justified by faith. All right, well, it's something to think about. Like, do you, I would ask you to kind of read it, when you have a chance and contemplate it and ask, do I have an issue with the message here, or is it some, or do you agree with the message, but just question whether Peter really fell short of it. But I mean, I kind of think, well, I'll just leave it at that unless you have any other comments or questions
No,
I feel like there are depths to this that we could continue to explore, but got to move on. So 2 Corinthians 11, that was the next deal. If someone comes to you and preaches a Jesus other than the Jesus we preach, or if you receive a different spirit from the spirit you received, or a different gospel from the one you accepted, you put up with it easily enough. I do not think I am in the least inferior to these super apostles. I may indeed be untrained as a speaker, but I do have knowledge. We have made this perfectly clear to you in every way. What else does he say? And so,
so he
first,
doesn't name them.
yeah, he does not name them. Now, and to address the identity of these super apostles, um, so I think it should be plain that by the time Paul is writing, well, when we're first introduced to the term apostle in the New Testament, it's in the context of Jesus sending out the 12, two by two. He chose these 12 men, these 12 disciples, called them apostles, sent them out two by two. So that's usually who we think of when we think of apostle.
Okay.
Of course, Paul is also called an apostle, so we know that the title apostle was not limited to the 12. And based on other clues, like 1 Corinthians 9, he says, am I not free? Am I not an apostle? Have I not seen Jesus our Lord? And then he's kind of laying into them for treating him like a chump, and reminds them that as an apostle, as a workman for God, he's entitled to certain prerogatives and privileges that he does not assert because he would rather just go without than impede the gospel in any way, but he makes a point to assert that, like, hey, I have the right to take along a believing wife, as does Peter or Cephas, and as do the Lord's brothers. So he is being treated as less than like a full status apostle, and he's not happy about it. Um, but I don't think it's so much because his personal dignity is being affronted. I think it's because they're not heeding his teachings as they should, and his teachings are just as authoritative as any other apostles. Um, but um, it's important to point out that he never says, "Hey, those other apostles, they're chumps, they're nothing. I'm the real guy." In fact, he outright says in 1 Corinthians 15, "For I am the least of the apostles, and do not even deserve to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God, I am what I am, and His grace in me was not without effect. No, I worked harder than all of them, yet not I, but the grace of God that was with me." Um, but it- by then, the term apostle came to mean more than the 12. An apostle, I think, based on 1 Corinthians 9. I think an apostle would be anybody who was an eyewitness to Jesus. And there were a lot of these people, and you kind of get there's a book by the scholar Richard Bauckham called Jesus and the Eyewitnesses, where he makes a pretty compelling case that, and it's kind of obvious in hindsight, like once he points it out, but the Gospels are the product of oral traditions that existed in the church before the Gospels were written down. Like you had these people who were eyewitnesses to Jesus traveling around the Mediterranean world, visiting churches that had already been planted, and giving their account of their experience with Jesus. And so when you read in the gospel accounts, like the story of Jairus, the synagogue ruler, whose daughter was ill and she died, but Jesus raised her from the dead. He's named in the gospel because Jairus, the synagogue ruler, was going around to the churches telling this story of his firsthand experience of Jesus healing his daughter. So by the convention at the time was that if somebody was named in the story, that often meant that they were the source of that information. So Jairus would have been considered an apostle um, in the early church. Also, First Corinthians, where he mentions he appeared to Cephas, then to the 12. Notice he calls the 12 because they were distinct as the 12 among all of the apostles of the church.
Right.
Then he appeared to 500 of the brothers at the same time, then to James, then to all the apostles. It's kind of tricky whether I think that by that time that the 500 would have qualified as apostles, but at the time the creed was formulated years earlier, it was probably a narrower group that's being referred to as appeared to James, then to all the apostles. All the apostles is a wider group than the
Right.
12.
Right.
Um, and we read in Acts that there were about 120 disciples in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost. Yeah, apostle took on a much wider membership by the time he's writing in Second Corinthians 11.
So he's saying right here that I'm no less than these other jabronis that keep coming around here.
Yeah,
But he would never call John and Peter jabronis. That's what
he
you're
would
saying.
not. I don't think he would. I don't think he would even use that word in their presence.
He'd be like, how dare you say jabroni around me who walked with our Lord?
I think that's exactly how it would have gone
I
down.
said
I,
I
I
said I'd be
think
reverent, but this is me. So,
I think that was some rock solid scholarship there,
yeah,
Dre.
sometimes I'm trying to take Bart Ehrman's spot in scholarship.
You could probably take a spot already.
So
I'm sorry. I
we have a lot more
I don't
that
want to
we could go
dispute
through.
Bart Ehrman's scholarship. I'll just dispute his character. But
Ooh, that's a that's a good distinction.
Yeah, I
Scholarship, because scholarship's pretty good. He just knows that he's full of shit. Is what you're saying?
I kind of think he is,
Yeah.
but
I wanna do something kind of fun.
I love fun.
Um,
Let's do fun
where
stuff.
where is it? Where is it? There's some notes that I took, I don't know, years ago.
Okay.
I dug them up.
Okay, so we're gonna plunge the darkest, craziest depths of Dre's beef with Paul here.
No, these are old thoughts, so it's kind of fun to look back through them.
Yeah.
Basically, I'm gonna rapid fire, and I think that you can shoot these down, and that should be fun, and it'll be good for,
I,
the audience.
I'm flattered by your confidence in me, and I
So
hope I don't let you down.
this was kind of a funny thing that I noticed about Paul years ago. So
Okay. I'm on
uh,
pins and needles, man.
so Matthew 5:17 through 20. Basically Jesus has a prophecy about, who loosens even the least of the commandments is called the least in the kingdom, and is actually a prophetic hint at Paul, because Paul's name translated in Latin means least. And he actually makes a
Uh,
joke about himself being called least, and then Augustine takes a shot at him later on and plays on the least. So do you think that the least in the kingdom is Paul? Because I mean, he's literally the least.
um, I don't think that. But
Okay.
it's that kind of parallels another passage. Among those born of women, there is none greater than John the Baptist. But the least in the kingdom of great the but the very least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. Um,
Mm, mm,
which kind of ties into this. Um, John the Baptist, of course, was righteous. I wouldn't say he was justified by his keeping of the law, but among those who kept the law, he was considered righteous. Jesus considered him to be pretty special. Yet he was not as great as the least in the kingdom of heaven. Why is that? I think it's because by faith, we it's precisely because of what Paul says. If you are justified by faith, it is as if you kept every provision of the law. Um, so we all, everyone in the kingdom of heaven, by having the righteousness of Christ attributed to us, but because of our being justified by faith, we're indwelled with the Spirit of God, which makes us among those born of women is an idiom to mean just mortals,
right.
but we are born of God, which makes us greater. But but again, to reiterate, Paul did not teach and what's known as antinomianism. I don't know why that was so hard. Antinomianism, which means anti meaning against, nomi the law. He didn't teach that. He didn't teach ignoring the law, disregarding the law. He taught upholding the law by faith. Um, so Paul was not opposed to the law. So,
So since we are in the Trump era,
uh-oh.
uh, so this is and it's my thoughts 10 years ago. So was Paul a deep state agent? And here's so
This
Jesus
is a
says,
this is a
beware
good one.
the leaven of the Pharisees and Herod. So Paul stands up and says, I'm a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. And this is long after he supposedly converted. So this is in Acts 23 and Philippians 3:5, where he says, I am a Pharisee. He doesn't say I was a Pharisee. He says I am a Pharisee. And there's a lot of scholars that believe that he's part of the Herodian family tree,
Hmm.
because it talks about kinsmen in Romans, where he's greeting some people that are there. Also, when he invokes his his Roman citizenship, that perhaps he had a little bit of royalty in him that the soldiers would even notice and probably get him some run time with Caesar. So what do you think about Jesus warning against these Pharisees and the Sadducees, depending if you're reading what is it, either Matthew or Mark? I think Mark says Pharisees and Herod, and Matthew says Pharisees and Sadducees, which is interesting because Herod's the one that put the Sadducees in charge because they basically replaced the Aaronic priesthood. Um, and why would a Pharisee run around getting sanctioned to like jack up Christians when that would be kind of a Sadducee thing? So was Paul working closely with Sadducees because he's a Herodian?
Well, I don't think
That's
there's
my
any.
deep state, baby.
Yeah,
He just
I don't.
infiltrated these
I don't.
Christians.
I don't think there's. I mean, I think Paul being a member of Herod's family is kind of a fringe theory, but
Oh, okay.
um, like I don't think there's any.
Why does he call him kinsman then?
Um,
Little Herodian. So it's like the dude's in Rome and he's writing the letter and calls him his
Paul
kinsman.
in Romans 16:11, greet Herodian, my kinsman.
Yep.
Um, well,
And he's a citizen. How does he get his
well, I
citizenship?
don't think there's any like you can have the name Herodian without being a member of the Herodian dynasty.
I guess.
Um, and so it's like it's a like look, it's I think it's entirely possible um that all that's true, that Herodian means he's a descendant of Herod, and Paul was related. So that's entirely possible. I But there's nothing that says that's necessarily true. It's all pretty loose and speculative.
But
But
Jesus said, beware of that. And when you add those two together,
well, when he
from
said
him being the least and being Herodian,
when he said beware of the yeast of the Pharisees, there's a passage that specifically identifies that yeast as hypocrisy. Like they're
okay.
claiming to they're pretending to be something they're not. And he's not saying beware of every single individual Pharisee. He's saying beware of this tendency that is characteristic of the religious authorities that are in charge. Don't be like them in this regard. Um, yeah, Paul certainly did not deny or apologize or hide the fact that he was a Pharisee, but in Philippians when he brings it up, it's only in the interest of saying, "Hey, look, I've got this great pedigree and and
Like
resume."
I know your law, dude. Like for real.
Um, he only brings that up to then say, but all of this is the Greek word he uses is skubala next to belonging to Christ. Like none of that matters. Like if somebody could, if that mattered, being like the Jewiest super Jew among Jews and keeping the matters of the law, I would matter, but none of that matters. That's all skubala, which is I'm told, the most vulgar Greek term for poop. Like he's
Oh
saying,
wow.
like all of that is shit, is
That's
what he said.
boo, Pucky.
Yeah, like Scubala is
So he definitely said scuba while the 12 weren't around because he would never use that term in front of them, right?
no jabronis is the word you don't want to use around them.
Right, jabroni. These jabronis, these super apostles, damn jabronis. They got nothing on my guy James.
Jesus called Herod a bitch.
That's so good.
Yeah,
And I think it's funny that in Jesus Christ Superstar, Herod is a bitch. It's like a fat gay dude prancing around. Always. It's always the culprit.
I think that was the specific casting of the one you saw. I think they have a different guy play
Herod?
him, and yeah, I mean, yeah, they recast that every few years.
Yeah, I know, but every time I see it, it's always
The the weirdo chick from Wicked, she's playing Jesus now.
she is playing Jesus. Yeah.
So I'm sure
She,
that's great.
if you like look at her shadow, she looks like what's that new vampire movie, black and white?
Nosferatu.
Yeah, she looks like Nosferatu,
Hmm. It's not black and white. It's just
off-colored.
it's very it's very grayish, but
Yeah, yeah. So we already went through Don't Believe the One in the Wilderness. Oh, here's a good one. Here we go. Matthew 7 and Genesis 49:27.
oh,
The
the whole
ravenous wolf of Benjamin.
yeah.
And we know, the ravenous wolf, in the morning devouring prey, Paul persecuting the church, in the evening dividing the spoil. So Paul later preaching the gospel. And he says he is of the tribe of Benjamin. And Jesus warned about this ravenous wolf
You
in
know,
Matthew 7. Beware false prophets, inwardly ravenous wolves.
um, that reminds me. Um, like I don't really need to refute that, do I? Because
It's kind of a stretch to me. Like,
it's pretty silly.
so
It's kind of
Jesus says this, but then you have to like, oh, what was he referencing? He
like why
didn't
would
say,
he use all like he why would he use all this coded language or speak about an individual guy? Um,
well, because it's prophecy.
yeah, but
What
it's
was he gonna say? Paul, a dude named Paul was gonna
yeah,
pop up.
yeah. Yeah, Isaiah said a dude named Cyrus is going to be the king of Persia. He's going to bring y'all back. Zechariah said a dude named Yeshua is going to be the Messiah. It could happen. It has happened. But that it kind of something I've been thinking about. You have in the Old Testament, you have King Saul of Benjamin, um, Paul's namesake,
Mm-hmm.
another Saul from the
Mm-hmm.
same tribe of Benjamin.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he's anointed the king, king of Israel by God. He's the one God chose for the people according to what the people order, according to what they want. Um, rebels against God, gets rejected. God anoints David. Saul of Benjamin pursues David, tries to kill him until Saul is killed. David ascends to the throne, and then you have the dynasty of David. Um, then, things happen. Then they come back from exile, expecting the son of David. Um, of course, that's Jesus. Jesus dies and rises again, ascends into heaven. And then Saul of Benjamin again hunts the the new David, just as his namesake did. But this is the redemption of Israel. It's the redemption of the world. The story plays in reverse. Um, Saul of Benjamin, rather than dying in his sin as he's hunting the son of David, he is redeemed. Um, he becomes the restored David's willful servant. And it kind of makes me like, it strikes me that church history is almost like the history of it's not yeah, I don't even want to say almost. It's like church history playing in reverse. It's like the inversion of it. Um, and I think right now we're kind of in the period of judges, where everyone did what was right in their own eyes because there was no king in Israel. Like we're all scattered in all these different denominations because there's no central there's no central authority to rally us, nor will there be in the sense of a king or a pope again. It has to be the inversion of that. It has to be from the bottom up by faith. We have to we have to gather to Christ willingly and voluntarily, not being forced by a king to do so. And I think that's the key to the redemption and triumph of the church. But anyway, that's just kind of a thought I've been having that you reminded me of by that. I can't really refute it because it's too silly to refute. So
So and then I think my last one is do I have another one?
I hope there's
Is
more.
a
I hope you have
uh
like five more.
I think I do. Oh yeah, here we go. Not everyone who says Lord, Lord. So Romans 10:9 versus Jesus in Matthew 7:21.
Hmm.
If you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. And Jesus is like, not everyone says Lord, Lord, even if they do mighty works, even if they do, cool things in my name, right?
Well, I think that the key there is if you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, like that's consistent with not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord. Um, he's like, because that's not the only condition. That I mean, and one publicly confessing Jesus Christ as Lord at the time that came with a potential cost. Um, so that in itself isn't nothing, but also, yeah, you have to believe in your heart. Believing in your heart that God raised him from the dead means you're gonna want to do what he like. You're gonna want to obey him. So you're not just that's gonna mean doing the will of the Father. So I think that covers all the I they're actually saying the same thing. So
Building on the rock versus the covenant of Paul. I have no idea what I meant when I said this. And my references were Matthew
Peter,
7 and
Peter versus Paul, I think.
Isaiah 28 was my reference. I have no idea what I meant by that.
Hmm.
So
I want to reconstruct it now.
I think it has something to do with like dispensationalism that I hate. I don't know.
Why do you hate dispensationalism?
I just do.
Do you believe in covenant theology?
Maybe.
Because those are usually the two alternatives, and covenant theology is
Didn't we do a
typical
show on
of
that?
Calvinism.
Didn't we do that again?
Kinda. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not sure we settled anything on that one because we kind of jump around, but we've done so many shows, man. I don't
I know he's
remember.
like years worth. Uh,
Yeah,
Food sacrificed to idols, deep things of Satan. Revelation 2 verses First Corinthians
yeah.
8 and 10.
Paul did not say eat food sacrificed to idols. Um, he said, don't worry about it until they say this has been sacrificed to idols, and then don't eat it. That's what he said. So,
But doesn't he mention the Spirit reveals to him the deep things of God? And I think that was my point. Like, where in Revelation, Jesus says, nah, that's the deep things of Satan. I don't know why I said that, why that was
hmm,
in my notes.
okay. You're not going to plant your flag there that I have to strain myself too hard to.
No, because I can't remember what it was. These are old notes. They're old.
All right.
I can't remember.
Um, all right.
Uh, Testing the apostles, an example of Ephesus. So in
Yeah.
Revelation 2:2, Jesus praises the church of Ephesus because you have tested who called themselves apostles and are not, and found them to be false. Could he have been talking about Paul?
Or he could have been saying the same thing Paul was saying.
Or is he talking about the jabronis?
He's talking about the jabronis, definitely.
Because according to Brian and Paul, we're talking about jabronis. Okay. I
That one
think
was easy.
yeah, it was those were my thoughts from years ago, kind of
Yeah.
my things that I observed while I was thumbing through the New Testament over periods of time.
All right. So do you love Paul now? Did we
No,
solve
yeah.
Paul?
Well, I mean, I think he's kind of a dick, but uh
I don't think he's a dick. I think he's I
yeah,
I I think he's an awesome dude, and
he's a righteous dude.
he is a righteous dude. I
And
uh
I think he's
I
a misogynist. I think
do you really, or are you just like you're just
he's
riffing right now?
all the things that talk like in the New Testament about women is
Yeah.
all Paul. It's like Paul, even the where he talks about it was Eve that was
Yeah.
deceived.
Yeah, he
Like,
did say that.
bro, no, it's Adam.
Well,
If Adam wouldn't have done it, we wouldn't have fallen.
That's
regardless of what Eve did, and all of a
that
sudden we're trying to push it off Adam, and
I think
it's the woman's fault. That's what
I
it kind
think
of read to me.
I think implicit in that is man's tendency to just do what women want us to do. And
Happy wife, happy life. Even
and
Adam's like, son of a bitch, you got me kicked out of Eden because I want to make you happy.
and I think that is kind of a that's a thing we're seeing now. I mean, feminism is basically just a recapitulation of the same, you know, hey, Adam, eat the fruit. Um, it's me asking, not the serpent. Um, you've got boobs, sure.
He's like, I mean,
What?
he's like, I have to, like, because you're it.
I mean,
You're my person.
I see boobs offering me fruit. I I tend to like it's hard saying no to that fruit. That's all I'll say.
So
Uh,
in I think it's the book of Adam and Eve in the Ethiopian Bible. It tells a story of uh Eve eating the fruit and then Adam having a choice. And he loved her so much that he was willing to leave the Garden of Eden to go follow her because she was getting booted. Like, hey, she's done. And Adam's like, nah, I'm responsible for her and I can't live without her, so I'm going out the gates too. I'm gonna go ahead and eat this. That's kind of what the story says. So it's kind of a little
C.S.
interesting early
yeah.
love story.
C.S. Lewis has a pretty interesting take on that in his book Paralandra. Have you heard of this or read it?
I don't know this book, no.
Um, it's great. It's probably like it's not his most popular works. He wrote a book called Out of the Silent Planet, followed up by Paralandra, followed up by That Hideous Strength. It's known as his space trilogy. Paralandra is basically about this. It's a it's the Paralander refers to the planet Venus. It's like the cosmic name for it that we don't
Mhm.
know. But this character from Earth named Ransom, who is a Christian academic, somewhat pattern off of C.S. Lewis himself. He is taken to by the angels to Paralandra to try to prevent the fall of that world's Adam and Eve.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and so there's this, it kind of, there's another demon, like I think Satan himself possesses this other professor who is there to be kind of the serpent to get them to disobey the one command God gave them. But CS he does it. It provides the occasion for an interesting commentary about um among other things in the book. There's a lot to the book. Just this one thing sticks out for this discussion, but he kind of explores the question of, well, what if when Eve ate the fruit, Adam had refused? Like what, would Adam have been her Christ? Would he have had to die for her? Or I don't shouldn't say have to. Would he have been offered the chance to redeem her by dying in her place and being the Christ who died for the sins of the world because he was sinless himself, and it was only one person whose sins he had to atone for. Um, and we don't know, but we like, but the
Because he
point,
sinned too, dick.
well, but we don't, yeah. But yeah, the point was like he didn't net like because Eve ate it, it doesn't mean he had to have. And there perhaps could have been a much more concise plan of redemption, and we might have a religion centered around the work of our first human father who died for our mother. But
And
C.S. Lewis he didn't get into that level of
would our
detail, but
mother have repented and straightened up, like, or would she do like we've done since Jesus resurrected?
what do you mean?
We've kind of shit on it as humanity,
Yeah.
like pretty thoroughly actually. Um, so I'm curious in this hypothetical, would Eve have recognized how perfect that was, and would she fly right the rest of
Yeah.
the way? Would
Good
she do a
question.
Paul? Would she do a Paul and fly right,
Right on.
or would she be a Judas?
Yeah.
So,
Good questions. But
so
so
we've left some stuff on the table, and that's okay because I think we're gonna revisit this again.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, I'll be praying for guidance for you, and
I
I hope
uh
you'll.
I no longer want to fight Paul,
That's cool.
so I might chill with him. I don't know if he drinks or not because he's kind of. I don't even know if I want to hang out with him. He's kind of, especially.
I think I really want to hang out with Paul.
re-
I like Paul. I think
you would like Paul.
I think you mean I don't think you mean that as a compliment, but I'm gonna take it that way. Like I'm
You
not I'm
you
not
take
gonna
it.
be I'm not gonna be defensive about
Well,
like
see, here's the thing. I'll be like Paul, and to the Judeans, I'll be like a Jew. To the other people, I'll be like them. So the fact that you would find that as a compliment, of course, it means compliment.
so what do you like what are you dissing Paul for saying that? Are you
Semi.
what do you think he meant that you're dissing him?
I I think he's the first code switcher. Is that a?
Um I mean I think
But I have
he's
I have accused him of lying before. So to
yeah you
me,
you did
that's
that you did that today.
I did. So with that and kind of, I don't know if it's lying more than it's manipulation to get to a means, or if it's a strategy or a tactic, right, to get as many people saved as possible,
Well,
where the end
I
where
think
the
it's
end justifies the means.
I think it's just relating to people on their terms and their context and trying to meet them where they are. Like,
But what does that entail? What does he leave
well,
out or add
when
to make that happen?
well, I don't think anything. I don't think there's any reason to presuppose that. I think it just
Then
like
why
when
then why did he say it?
well, it's like when a missionary like goes to a foreign land and they adopt the customs and manner of dress of those lands. They're not lying about anything. They're assimilating to the culture in order to be among the people they're trying to reach,
Hmm.
to make themselves relatable. It isn't deception. They're not, I mean, a white person going to a foreign land where he's obviously a foreigner,
Where he's
but
obviously culturally appropriating.
but
And
yeah, but learning their culture and adopting their customs in order to,
or at least
be
or at least trying to, out of respect.
yeah,
Okay.
I think respect is the key word there.
Okay.
It's not like he's like I don't think Paul was ever deceiving anyone by pretending to be something he's not in order to win people over. I think it just means that he's like I said, he's
When in Rome.
more or less.
And he was in Rome.
For a
Uh,
minute. Well,
yeah,
for 2 years. For 2 years he was.
the Nero guy.
That is like such a fascinating thing to me. Just how Acts ends.
Right.
Um,
It wouldn't, like, what if he like actually stood his trial? That'd been a cool account of see how he defends himself in front of Caesar.
yeah. Um, it's fascinating to me that there are people who claim like there's the critical scholars insist that the Gospels were written after 70 AD, which means Acts had to be written still later. Yet Acts ends in the year 62 AD. Um, there's and all this stuff happened between 62 AD and 70 AD that was of inestimable importance to the themes that Luke was writing about. Um, the Great Fire of Rome,
Right.
the resultant persecution of Christians because Nero blamed the fire on Christians, which led to the martyrdom of Peter and Paul, countless other. Tacitus says that there were multitudes of Christians in Rome who were who were executed in gruesome, horrific ways. Um, and the fact that you have a Roman writer basically confirming the timeline of Acts up until that point. Um, but he describes Christians as a class hated for their abominations. Like there were enough Christians in Rome 30 years after the crucifixion of Jesus that they could be described by a hostile Roman writer as a class. Like that means there's a lot of Christians there.
Right.
Multitudes of them were executed under Nero, yet Rome remained a major population center of Christians even after that, which means there were like a ton of Christians in
Roman
Rome
citizens must have been super annoyed by them.
by
Like,
Christians.
like the ones that call them atheists. They must have hated them.
That's also super fascinating. Like
Right?
there's so much about early Christianity that like there's all these little details. You could build an entire case for the truth of Christianity just on those details. That they were atheists. But um, but yeah, to my other point, like you have all of that stuff happening. Then you have the Jewish revolt, the split from like the flight to Pella of the Jerusalem church, the split between the Christians in Judea and Jews because the Christians won't fight the Romans because they're, they that's just not what Christianity is about. We're not about violent revolt. Just so much stuff that happened up to and including the fall of Jerusalem that is never written about in the New Testament, which can like the only reasonable explanation for that is that it's not written in the New Testament because it hadn't happened yet when the New Testament was written. But anyway, that's a whole podcast in itself.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll tell you, what we're gonna do for a second part of this podcast, and maybe Matt can join us for that one. Um, we didn't get into Second Peter or James and whether or not those epistles affirm or refute Paul. And I think that would be a fun topic. And I think those two letters alone would take a long time. Just
Mm,
I mean we
I'm here for it.
all right.
You want to do that next, or
Yeah,
do you
let's
want
do it
to?
next. Let's do it next
All
because
right.
it's got a continuation. We'll kind of finish up our little series on Paul. Um,
All
and
right.
it'll be fun. So
So we did not
it,
solve Paul,
we did not solve Paul,
but next week we're going to solve Paul.
but we solved me and Paul getting into it in in the after in the when we're back here
I think
on
you,
Earth,
me, and Paul
right?
against the jabronis.
I think me and Peter be like, "Come here, Paul. You want some? Tag me in. Tag me in, Pete." No, Barnabas, you're on the bench. It's me.
The joke's on you, man. Peter and Paul are on the same side.
That's what it says in Rome. They have the big statue and they got its own basilica and
Mm.
all the all the stuff, all the things.
All right, we'll solve Paul next week.
We will. So with that, thanks for hanging out. Please leave a comment. Talk about what a heretic I am. That's fine. You come at me, bro. You can call me a jabroni, whatever you want. What it's cool. I'll give you the rock bottom in the people's eyebrow. And with that, I will say, stay enlightened, stay curious, and we'll see you next week. And perhaps we'll even have good old Matt back with us.
Hope so.
God bless and good night.
Bye bye.